Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Spiceworks Ziff Davis Partner Webinar brought to you by Pivotry and Vtex. And we'll be talking about Beyond the Cyber 5, turning holiday season success into Q1 profits. I'm David Solis from the community, and I'll be your moderator for today. Before we turn it over to our experts, I want to remind everyone about our console. This session is being recorded, so if you step away or miss any portion of today's session, you'll be able to review it on demand with a link that will be sent out to all of you after today. Pivotry and Vtex have also provided additional content in the resources section. That's right there under the slide window, so take a look there for some additional downloads. We will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, so you can submit your questions at any time using the Q&A widget on your screen that's there on the left. Those will queue up on our side, and we'll get to as many of those before we finish. Finally, we do invite everyone to join the webinar chat. You can bring that up using the chat icon button there at the bottom of your screen and dive in with your fellow attendees to start a conversation. A reminder that our community does follow our Spiceworks Ziff Davis community guidelines. So keep things fun and professional while having chat. With that, I'll turn it over to James Urbati, General Manager at Commerce at Pivotry.
Thanks, David. I'm James Urbati. I'm the Senior Vice President and General Manager of Commerce at Pivotry. For the last decade, I've been working with enterprise B2B and B2C companies to support their e-commerce platforms. And at Pivotry, we design, build, and manage complex ecosystems for market-leading brands. And that includes tools like data management tools, supply chain tools like order management and warehouse management, and of course, commerce platforms. And we design, build, and manage all of those systems to help create frictionless journeys for our customers. And I'm joined today by Jared. Jared, if you want to introduce yourself.
Of course. Hi, Jared Blank. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Vtex. I'm a little sad that James blew by my picture I had up there from when I was 14 years younger or so than I am today. I like to be reminded how I used to look. So Vtex is a commerce platform. I like to say that we are the operating system for commerce. We do a wide range of commerce allow our clients around the world to do a wide range of commerce strategies, from direct to consumer, marketplace and channel management, B2B, in-store. So Vtex went public earlier this year. We've been around 20 years, and we're looking forward today to sharing some of what we learned.
Sounds good. And I think we're going to start with a quick poll here, and that's just to ask the audience, how did Cyber 5 go for you this year? What was the holiday like? Better than expected? Basically what you expected, or was it not as good? We'll give folks a few seconds here to make their choices.
Maybe people were reluctant to answer because it should be not as well as expected. Maybe they're grammar people.
It's possible.
That's possible. Yeah, they were really spooked by that. They're like, I'm not going to participate.
I think we've got the answers we're going to get. I'm going to move on to the reveal here.
So James, do you think that's because people lowered their expectations sufficiently to meet them? Or do you think that actually people planned pretty well? What would you guess?
I'm just based on this. I think, people planned pretty well. I think most people had a good sense of this was a weird holiday. And I think there were a lot more variables than I think retailers, are used to having to deal with supply chain issues and not knowing, are people going to do most of their shopping in store, or is e-commerce going to continue to maintain the pace it was on? So this is, I'm actually pleasantly surprised by this. I like that the majority here had what they expected.
Yeah. I've been talking for a few months about how I was really curious how the planning went this year, because obviously retail is so based on comps, and when last year was so wacky, glad to see that my planning friends did a great job.
Yeah. And let's jump into kind of market trends here for the larger ecosystem. This is definitely going to be a record-breaking year. I think that's good news for e-commerce in general. I think projected revenue for the holiday season, by and large, is successful. We've definitely seen increases. I think the interesting but not surprising numbers that I saw were, Cyber Monday and Black Friday. We didn't hit the record numbers that we had last year, and I think that's because of two things. I think one, people felt more comfortable going back and shopping in brick and mortar stores, and then the second thing is that that discount rate. That bottom box in the middle there, 50% discounts were significantly less this year. I think with supply chain issues and retailers recognizing they're likely to run out of some of those most on-demand products, we're less incentivized to do deep discounting, and I think that drove less traffic on the big sales day, Black Friday and Cyber Monday. I don't know if anything on this slide is a surprise to you, Jared, or anything else stuck out, but the overall story here is e-commerce in general still on the rise, more adoption, definitely an increase if you look at holiday by and large from November to Cyber Monday. But any surprises here? Anything that stands out?
I think the thing that I didn't expect was that discount, the extraordinary lack or reduction in discounting. And I think back maybe 6, 7, 8 years ago. And I remember as the discounts each Black Friday weekend got larger and larger. And then I remember the first time I saw on Ann Taylor's website, it was 60% off everything. And my team, back when I was at Tommy Hilfiger, we got together, we said, like, where can it possibly go from 60% off everything? You can't run a business that way. And I'm curious to see, this year was the reset where we say, okay, you know what? The crazy discounting that was really nuts for all those years, can we take a step back, and 40 is the new 60? And we'll start seeing, 40% off site-wide again to kind of reset where the expectations are, because we're going to see less discounting moving forward, while these supply chain issues still exist. So I'm really curious to see in over the next year, have we reset customer expectations around discounting?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So the topic of this is basically how to turn what we hope was a successful, Cyber 5 or overall holiday season, and how retailers can turn, what they've learned and what's happened into success in Q1 and beyond. And I think every plan to take advantage of success, starts with looking hard at what worked and what didn't. And I don't think it's more complex than that. Some of the solutions might be complicated, but the approach is as simple as it gets. Like, people need to do more of the good stuff and kind of less of the bad. And so Jared and I took a look at 4 areas we've identified that we think retailers need to look at in order to, continue that success going forward. And those 4 areas were data-driven decisions, modernization, marketplace strategy, and customer journey. And we're going to start with data-driven decisions. And Jared, I'm going to set you up here. When we first talked about this, this was, you had some resistance to talking about real-time analytics and data because you think that's table stakes. And I think you were surprised to hear from me that I still have customers that need to wait and pull data out of logs, or there's a 24-hour wait for them to get real-time access to sales or marketing or merchandising data. Why don't you start with that and then walk us through some of the other data-driven decision kind of paths you think retailers should take?
James, I think it's funny thinking back on that. I was probably a little flippant. And for those of us on the B2B side, and I'm not sure if we have B2B marketers on here, real-time analytics aren't necessarily table stakes yet. That, a lot of us still do deal in a world that's not necessarily real time. And so I do want to be, I want to be cognizant that while that I think what you said is true, that there are still lots of businesses where maybe some things are real time, but really to understand how their business is doing, it does take a day for someone to pull logs and see it. But what I think is, I think what's become interesting over the years here is that we do have access, even whether it's real time or not. Merchandising and marketing teams have access to a lot of data. And I've been places, and I've done this myself, where you pull together reports and there's lots of numbers on it. And each week or month you update those numbers and no one asks you questions about it and you don't tell a story about it. And so I thought it would be this might be an opportunity to say, like, oh, you know what? the fact that we've got a lot of data means that actually we have to do a much better job focusing on what's important. And just because you can have 15 things on your dashboard, maybe you should have 2 things on your dashboard. And this is actually one of the things on my team here at Vtex I've been encouraging is what's one thing where we can actually, one piece of data where we can actually make changes, take actions from that. And I think that actually helps do 2 things. One, it helps reduce some of the frustration that teams have because you have a lot of data. That means there's a lot of ideas about things you can update. But the reality is you may not have the technical support or ability to make those changes or make those changes quickly. So I really encourage my team, myself included, focus on where you can actually make changes because maybe you on the team can control those things. Or maybe you've got an A/B testing tool where you or your business users can make updates based on data. Focus where you can actually make changes. I don't know if you where you sit, but we still have conversations, again at Vtex, but in past jobs too, about, well, I know that Google Analytics says such and such and such, my paid load times or time on page or number of visits, but I don't believe it. Or we know there's problems, or we know it's not capturing everything. So if you're still having those conversations, then it's probably time to invest in making sure that data is reliable and granular, because it really sort of poisons the well for all of your conversations. Because once people start saying, oh, I know this report isn't correct because of XYZ reason, that tends to bleed into a broader set of conversations about can we really believe the data that's in front of us. And my final point here, this is just something you have to build into your system and your culture at your company. The idea that you're going to have to try repeatedly to find data points where you can actually make changes. And I think a really important piece of this is making sure that your team is comfortable sharing, if not exactly failures, or at times where the data wasn't correct. How did they fix it? Or that there were times where they thought a data point was really important, and that it turns out, you know what, that actually was steering us in the wrong direction. Being able to share stories that are not always about huge wins creates an atmosphere and a culture where people want to try and try again and share the story of the trying rather than just the outcomes. So I'd say those are sort of 4 areas where you can look back over the past couple of months and say, did I really have information that helped me make business decisions that I could act on and the team felt really good about? And James, I know there's a few points there that you wanted to add along those lines.
Yeah, no, and I think I'll latch on to your last point there. I think retailers need to be intellectually honest and critically self-aware. It's actually my 3rd bullet point, but I think it's applicable to what you just said. Like, they need to understand, maybe they don't have real-time analytics yet, but maybe they need to start looking at moving towards that. I think more modern technology, modern software like Vtex, for example, like you guys have much better access to real-time analytics that you can share with customers that maybe isn't available to the retailers on their current technology platforms. And should this be is this a real obstacle to you providing the customer journey you want to your end consumer? Like, is it time now to look at those pieces of technology that aren't delivering what should be expected? Do you need to look at pushing that endeavor forward? I think there's a lot of folks that I think pre-pandemic told everybody they had an omni-channel experience. And as soon as the pandemic hit, that was proven to not be true. Well, I think a lot of people got exposed. They made all these investments, but it really wasn't a unified commerce experience. And so I think it's important that retailers look at the tools they have, the data that they have, and even if it's not good news, I think they need to take that information and make the best decisions possible. It requires a thick skin and I think a special approach to really action that stuff. I think it's not enough just to have the data, and you touched on this as well, but they need to understand and action it. You're dealing with multiple data sources, possibly different silos inside your organization, but context matters. And so I think, if a relatively obscure product on your site is now your number 1 seller, like you need to know why that is. Has marketing changed? Are you out of stock on your most requested product? Like, there's information that you need in order to take that data, view it through the correct lens, and then you need to be able to action it. And so I think, a lot of this coming out of the busiest time of the year for retailers, it's important to identify where those silos still stand in your organization, and are they getting in the way of you making good decisions with the data you have. And then the last point here is I think you follow customer behavior. If you have the right data, real time, or you have to dig it out, but if you get the data and you see your customers' behavior trending in a direction, I think it's important you look at that, figure out what that means, and then figure out what you're going to do about it. And I'll just touch on one very specific thing. If an increasing percentage of your customers are willing to pay an expedited fee to get things shipped to them faster, I feel like that's an opportunity to action that data and fine tune the experience. Do you offer free 2-day shipping the way we used to pre-pandemic? Do you offer more delivery options? Like if they're willing to pay for expedited shipping, if they had more options for ways to get that faster, would they take advantage of that? Is buy online, pick up in store the answer to that? I want this in 2 days, or I want this real time. I want this in hours. Can you provide that for them? And we'll talk about marketplaces in a second, but if customers are looking and searching on your website and they have their carts full, but they're still searching on your website and not finding what they need, do you need a marketplace strategy? Do you need to provide them an endless aisle? You really need to take that customer data and use that to make good decisions. I think our next topic is modernization. I think this is a good one, Jared, for you to kick us off on. Vtex is a relatively modern application. It definitely is a step forward in my mind from the monolithic e-commerce platforms that I'm used to dealing with. But modernization across your entire stack, I think, is really important for retailers.
Yeah, I was thinking about the weak links, and I had a conversation with a head of e-commerce at a very large retailer, and she was saying how caught off guard they were back in March, April of 2020, and how they kind of dabbled in omnichannel and buy online, pick up in store, but they didn't. I think maybe intellectually they knew, but they didn't do the things you have to do to find a champion and innovate. And they did not do that, and they were caught wildly off guard. Now, the positive thing is, that was kind of James to talk about Vtex as one of the options, but I think nowadays on a modern platform, it allows you the flexibility to adapt to market changes. And I don't think any of us can pretend that anyone was prepared for what happened in the end of March. But what I was really amazed by how many businesses sort of embrace the necessity is the mother of invention, and were able to roll out omnichannel experiences, buy online, pick up in store, curbside, because they had to. And maybe they had been thinking about it. And I think the ones who were able to do it were the ones who had been preparing for that. And the ones who had not been preparing for it, the lucky ones, were on a much more modern, flexible platform where they were able to adapt there. And I think it's a great exercise, even during some of the slower time at the very end of the year here, to take a look at what you've been doing and where are the weak links. And the weak links can mean different things. It might mean, we think that the world is moving in this type of direction, and we're not there. That might mean, we'll talk a little bit later about live shopping and conversational commerce, but we believe that there are going to be these new means of selling, and we're not ready for it. Or it could be some of the omnichannel stuff, or it could be merchandising tools. It could be personalization. Think about what your strategy is and what is the area that's the blocker for getting that done. And I actually think the second bullet point here around finding a champion is most important, because ultimately we still work in companies and we still have to ask other people for money or for their approval or for resources or for people to do these projects. You need to find a like-minded individual in your organization to work with you to champion it. Someone actually still has to believe in that. Because, I think that especially if you think about your CFO has either tens or dozens or hundreds of people coming to them with ideas. You need to find someone else in your organization, maybe in a different region, who has already implemented something successfully, or where you can solve a specific need to attract new customers or retain customers. Find another person that you can cooperate with to lead this project. And the reality is, it's not this project, it's constant. It's ongoing innovation. And I mentioned it on the last slide, I think culture plays a huge piece of this, because there are organizations where you can do a project where you feel like you've really moved things 2 years ahead, and you may have another idea of what the next thing is, and you may hear from your CFO or COO, but I thought we just did this project. Why are we doing another project? And there's other organizations that'll say, I'm so thrilled we got this done. What's the next thing? What's the next thing? How you create that culture of constant innovation and embracing these big, hairy projects, I think is a big challenge, but I think a challenge personally for each of us to find organizations that embrace that, so that we can address some of these problems, which are the reasons we even got into e-commerce in the first place.
Yeah, I think that's been the approach, we've taken at my company is, we went through an exercise where we tried to figure out, like, what is it we do, especially in the modernization front for customers. And when we looked at a lot of the projects we were working on, we ran into exactly what you're talking about, Jared, is that, we had some of those questions that popped up, like, I thought we just did a project, why are we doing another project? And not being able to point back to the why. And there was a lot of new for the sake of new. And I don't think that's a good way to approach modernization. We ended up, settling on the idea of reducing friction, and reducing friction both for the customer journey, the end consumer, and for our clients internally. Like, how hard is it for them to do things on their current technology? And when there's enough friction there, like, those are things that need to be replaced. But I think when you do that, you have something to measure that against. There's a return on investment to that, either in increased conversion rates or efficiencies inside the company. And I think when you do that, two things happen. One, you're able to prove we replaced this technology because of these reasons. We solved these business problems or these customer journey problems. And we can show a real return on investment. But then I think that modernization becomes a shifting target, as it should be. You're always going to be modernizing your stack. I think it comes down to prioritizing what's important. Like, I have $1 to spend. Where do I spend that dollar on innovation and modernization inside my company to get the best return I can possibly get, to have the biggest impact on the customer experience, or the largest impact on our efficiencies on the back end? I think a lot of retailers need to force their platforms, their technology platforms, and their partners. I think they need to let those people, take care of their part. I think they need to hold their vendors accountable for delivering some of that work. And I think, if we're talking modernization, it's impossible to talk about not talk about automation. And I think in making things easier and taking work that doesn't have any meaningful impact away from actual people and manual processes, and taking advantage of technology to make those things easier. And I'll end with one point. And, I hear this more frequently than I should. We are frequently providing, new technology or new approaches or fixing things that are broken. And I'm constantly surprised by retailers that say, I can't believe how long we lived with this issue. And this goes back to what we talked about on the earlier slide. Like, you need to be critically self-aware. You need to be intellectually honest. Like, are you doing things that don't make any sense, that have a negative financial impact or put an unnecessary burden on your team? Identify those things. There are technologies out there. I wouldn't use technology alone to solve those, but I can't believe how long we lived with this issue is a recurring theme, unfortunately, with some of my retail customers. And I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Jared.
James, it's funny, that last one, I was forgot to mention earlier. One of the really easy things I used to do around this issue of modernization, I had a whiteboard in my office, which seems funny. Does anyone have offices anymore? But I had a whiteboard in my office, and I always had 4 or 5 of the big problems we needed to solve, which were, basically the weak links. And I stared at them every day. And people would come into my office and they'd be thinking about one of those things, and they'd say, oh, like you said, 2-day shipping. Why does our shipping take so long? And it would just sit there, and it brought conversation. It was like a conversation starter for people who came into my office. But really what it did was 9 months would go by, and I'd say to myself, why is that still up there? Why aren't we doing anything about it? And just staring it in the face literally every day, I would say that. I would say, I can't believe how long we've lived with this. And it would force you, because it's almost embarrassing. Like, I've known about this problem. Why aren't we doing anything? And sometimes that's enough of a push. So I said before, this is about people. And sometimes you just need to embarrass yourself a little bit to say, okay, you know what? It's time. That thing's been up there. And so just writing it down, staring it in the face, is a way to address some of these. And get your team on board, because they're, at least back in the day, would walk into your office and see it, hold you accountable.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think sharing those priorities or sharing those issues widely, like you said, it forces everybody to be accountable. This has been a problem. It's been on the whiteboard since this date. Like, I think that's a great way to motivate action and kind of creative problem solving. So I think that's a great idea. Point number 3 here, marketplace strategy. And I feel like this is something retailers can't get away from anymore. And Jared, if you want to kick us off, I know you've got a ton of experience with marketplaces, and maybe start with defining it. I know you marketplace means several things. Like, when we say that, what do we even mean?
Yeah, I was going to say that's usually where this conversation starts around marketplace, but it is we mean it a couple of ways. So a marketplace, people think of Amazon as the marketplace, where it is a seller where other sellers are providing the products. That can be a marketplace, but more often than not, the conversations we're having around marketplace aren't that at all. That it is more along the lines of a channel management play, where you, as a branded seller, maybe you do not currently have direct consumer relationships, but that you sell through, fulfill through a third party, through a distributor or through a retailer. A marketplace is a way to aggregate those retailers so that you create a website. People place the orders through you, but it's fulfilled through your retail partners. They get the credit for the order, they fulfill it, they're thrilled about that, you get first-party data. That's also a marketplace model, though we're increasingly calling that channel management. And what I think broadly, when I think about marketplace, I think that the future of commerce growth is going to come from one of two ways. Either you're going to sell a broader range of products, or you're going to sell more products in more places. And both of those are what marketplace sells, because it allows you to bring on a wider range of sellers onto your website without having to invest in the inventory, either in purchasing the inventory or holding it necessarily. Or it allows you to get your products onto other marketplaces and sell your products in a broader range of places, or in the channel management case, to sell it directly yourself, but fulfill it through retailers. So growth is either going to come through a broader range of products or a broader range of distribution channels. That's what marketplace solves for. And to me, that's how you sell it internally as well. And I think actually, the more you can stay away from using marketplace, that word, the more likely you are to be able to sell this, because everyone is trying to sell more products in more places, right? Like, you want to broaden your assortment because that's what your customers are looking for, or you want to try to grow your revenue without having to take on that inventory risk. That's how you sell this internally. And so I think the more you can avoid marketplace, even internally here at Vtex, when people will come when we'll have a discussion and we'll say, oh, we've been speaking with this retailer about their marketplace strategy, someone will inevitably say, what do you mean by that? And so rather than have that conversation internally, which becomes a bit of a quagmire because a lot of retailers are hesitant to talk about Amazon, I would be really, really specific in your language. Oh, we're trying to grow our assortment and we can do that without tying up capital. Or we think we can just grow our direct sales without upsetting our distribution partners. Those are two things that all retailers are thinking about, whereas marketplace, I mean, it's fine as a term, but I think that ends up leading you into places where you won't necessarily have the conversation that you want to have. And as James, I think, can talk about, this is even, I think on your side as well, an area that retailers are really interested in speaking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's no shortage of partners that, will tell you that they have their your marketplace problem solved. Amazon and Walmart, like everybody has a solution for you. There's a ton of technology that you can build your own marketplaces on. I love the idea of getting away from the term marketplace because it's such a loaded term and creates context, maybe that you don't want. I threw the word strategy on the end here. I think you articulated better kind of the problem I see with it is you're not solving a marketplace problem. You need to have a strategy about how you're going to use marketplace, concepts, tools, and approaches to deliver the business solutions you need. I love the way you phrase it instead, Jared. Like, let's look at the problem. Let's talk about solving those problems all retailers have, and don't slap a marketplace sticker on it. There are marketplace solutions to those problems, but you're starting the conversation in the right place. What problem are you trying to solve? Um, I think it's important to know what the team looks like, and I don't think it's the same for every place. So depending on what problem you're trying to solve, I can see a marketplace, team internally at a company being a dedicated group of people separate from the rest of the e-commerce team. And depending on how you do it or execute it, it could require different skills than you're used to having on the e-commerce side. I love that you brought up the channel conflict thing. I think how you go to market with your partners and your distributors, what inventory you add is going to be a good match for your aesthetic, your culture, your retail objectives. Like, you need to pick the right products if you're extending your own marketplace. But yeah, I think, are you trying to solve an out of stock problem? Are you trying to give your customers more options to keep them, engaged with your brand for longer? What problem are you trying to solve should be step one. And then there are any number of tools I think you could use to sell that. But I love the idea of taking marketplace out of the conversation, at least to start. I think that's a great idea. So our last topic, customer journey. Building a great customer experience is simple. You just need to give customers exactly what they want, when they want it, how they want it, and then be prepared for that to change constantly. I think we could easily have done an entire session on customer experience alone. So I think this is an interesting topic. I think we're going to go through some good connections to information you may have gathered during holiday this year, and be able to use that to better set yourself up as a retailer in the future. And I also think we can talk about some very specific things that we think are going to be, part of the roadmap for all retailers, coming up. And Jared, if you want to, kick us off on customer journey.
Yeah, I think I want to talk about two specific up and coming strategies that I think are really interesting, and we're really early. And so it's fun to still talk about how this will play out. So the first is conversational commerce. I think of the best example of this in my, not exactly, I was going to say day-to-day life, but maybe week-to-week life, is Instacart, where someone is shopping on your behalf and you are chatting with them through an app and directing them about what to buy. You may ask questions about, which apples look good, that type of thing. We have in Brazil, WhatsApp there's no exact equivalent here in the US. I mean, you may use it for chat or calling here, but WhatsApp really is an ecosystem. And what we're seeing in Brazil is people using WhatsApp as a mean for actually conducting commerce, for selling through the app, for connecting. Retailers are using WhatsApp through us to connect the sales folks in their stores with individuals, with customers. And so a customer might be on their website and want to chat through WhatsApp with a salesperson in the local store, and then actually check out and buy through WhatsApp. Because there's no equivalent here, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Apple has a product called Business Chat that allows you to do some similar things. I think there is a future in conversational commerce in conducting orders through chat. We're going to see how that develops. I think we could probably spend half an hour on that if I could bring in the folks who actually know way more than I do there. And live streaming. I don't know about you, James, specifically, but I know that during the rough months of 2020, I found some solace and comfort in watching QVC. I think there is an incredible skill set involved with being able to talk about a frying pan for 25 minutes. Live streaming commerce is really, really big in China, really big in China. It is growing in Latin America. We've seen people dabble in it here in the US. Vtex has a functionality built in that allows you to do live streaming really easily through your website. I don't want to do a sales pitch on that, but I only mention that because now I've spent some time around live streaming. It is a fascinating way to engage with your customers. There is no better way to get people who are interested in a specific product to spend more time with you than watching a video and having a salesperson who knows 20 minutes of things about a pair of skis to engage with you. That is going to blow up in the next year. I'm really excited to see how that plays out. The other area, as we were preparing for this, James and I were talking a little bit about why don't people use the returns process more as a means to wow customers? And I think Zappos is the best example of this. But what's amazing to me is 15 years later, they're still the best example of making a frictionless return process. Oh, I'll give Warby Parker some credit too. Okay, fine. Warby gets some credit there too. That really wows customers. Amazon, through their Zappos acquisition, I think really rethought this, and it's hard to really think back 10 years ago. It was actually kind of miserable to return items to Amazon. And I think maybe a year ago, the first time I had a product I need to return to Amazon, and they said, you know what, don't bother sending it back. And how amazing that was from a customer experience standpoint. And I think all of these things are because those companies were thinking about the customer journey. It's not just about buying on the website or in store. It's about how can I get customers more information, more engaged at the front end, and how can I make that last bit even better than any of our competition could imagine. It's really thinking that all the way through. And I like to think that those customers were following some of our advice from earlier slides about thinking about where is the weak link. And Zappos, I think their story is about the weak link far and away in shoe shopping was shoes don't fit that often. How about if we made it super easy for returns? I think your business, whichever business you're in, has that same weak link in your customer journey where you can address it, and this is the year. That probably starts with unified commerce, right, James?
Absolutely. I think everybody is aware of this, but I think it's worth hammering home. Regardless of where they start or end their buying journey, consumers are making decisions based on or buying based on some sort of digital enablement. So regardless of where they start, all transactions are digitally enabled now. Whether they're buying in the store, or they buy from the website, or they buy directly from their mobile device. I think there are very few commerce engagements, by and large, in the retail space that wasn't motivated or helped, assisted, or enabled by some sort of digital technology. And so I think, unified commerce, I think, is a replacement for omni-channel, and I think is a better descriptor for what we're talking about here. You need to, going back to that first statement up in bold on the top, like there is, Instacart's a good example. Grocery stores that didn't provide delivery suddenly were at risk. Their brand was at risk because if I wanted groceries delivered, I went to Instacart. And if my grocery store wasn't available as one of the options, I changed brands. If at the store, my brand of peanut butter wasn't available, I changed to something else. And so I think customer loyalty has been tested more in the last couple of years than probably ever before. And so that loyalty, part of that loyalty is about making sure that you're reducing friction everywhere up and down the stack, everywhere you can. And I think, you mentioned this just a couple seconds ago, the frictionful moments. Look for the big gotcha moments, the eye-opening, what can we do differently that'll set us apart? Or what big problem, what big rock can I move out of the way to enable higher conversions on the consumer side? I think that's really important. I think there's a constantly building trust component to all of this as well. And, it's security, it has to feel safe for them to buy from you and use your digital tools. You've got to have integrity. When you screw up, when, you ship them the wrong thing, when you don't have a good brick and mortar experience, like you need to own that and then you need to make it right. And then reliability, like nothing is worse than buying a product on a website and finding out several days later that it's out of stock. And so you've got to put the time in as the retailer to make sure the information you're providing to your customers is up to date and accurate, and then own it if it's not. And then I'll end on the same point you made about the return process. Like I agree 100%, Jared. I feel like this is a missing component to some retailers' customer journey kind of view. this is an opportunity where customers want to engage with you. You have an opportunity to either forward your brand and make those consumers more loyal, or the opportunity to drive them the other direction. And I think the, hey, don't worry about it, keep it, Amazon approach, I think it works for Amazon. It may not work for all retailers, but I agree with you. There is a way to handle that moment for every retailer that makes that experience, a positive, a net positive, and possibly even an opportunity, as both you and I have said, to wow the customer. But I think that's an underappreciated, undervalued, undermined, component of the customer journey that most retailers don't focus enough attention on. It costs them a lot of money. I feel like it's viewed mostly as a negative thing, but it can be a positive. Your customers want to engage with you. You have an opportunity to make that right and forward your brand or not. And so those are the 4 points. Jared, I don't know if you want to highlight anything here. I personally am a big fan of the data-driven decisions. I think that's really key. And the customer journey thing, I think both you and I are passionate about. And like we both said, that we could easily spend a couple of hours talking just about that. But any points that stand out or anything you want to leave the audience with?
Yeah, I think you said something better than I said it about being intellectually honest with yourself, which just means going back to sort of first principles, what are we good at? What are we able to accomplish? What are our values for our customers and ourselves? And I think that will help steer you in the right direction, because there's data-driven decisions assumes there's a lot of data. There's a lot of things you can do. And I think just being realistic about where are we in our journey, because not every company is an expert, where are we in our journey and where can we actually make an impact that would matter to our customers and to the company. And if you start there, you'll make great decisions over the coming year.
Thanks, Jared. David, I don't know, can we get a time check? And then if we have time for questions, I think we should take questions.
Yes, we do have some time. We've got some questions that have come in, so we can continue to get those in, and we'll get to as many as we can. One question here from M. Southworth is, what is your opinion on social media influencers to promote your company and products?
I'll let Jared take the majority of that, but I'll just jump in here and say the live shopping thing, that's absolutely a huge deal outside of the US. And I think maybe it's unfortunately an aversion based to people that grew up with QVC and Home Shopping Network. It feels very yesterday. It's not. This is going to be huge in North America. It's been huge in every market it's come to. And so I think not just social media influencers, but celebrities, athletes, I think there's a huge opportunity for an entirely different approach and engagement with customers. And I think, Amazon's already adopting it. I'm a big fan of the tools Vtex is building in natively into their commerce platform, but live shopping is a thing. It's not going to go away. It's going to get bigger. And so I'm a fan of it. I like the direction it's going. And I think social media influencers are just one small part of that. Jared, if you want to add on to that.
I had just read that a social media influencer in China sold $1 billion worth of a product. If that's the size of the market we're looking at. Obviously, every company is different. You need to make sure that, go back to first principles. Is this person represent the values that I'm trying to represent? If so, they would be perfect for you. I think James makes a great point that this ties in with live shopping incredibly well. But social media influencers make a ton of sense in markets where you think they're representing your brand. The only thing you need to not the only thing you need to consider. One of the considerations is when you hire humans who are outside of your business to represent you, their foibles sometimes get in the way. Just be prepared for things to go wrong. And so it doesn't mean it will happen, but there are lots and lots of examples where that is the case, whether it's social media folks or celebrities. You just need to prepare yourself. Talk to your legal team at the beginning when you start to think about that conversation. Make sure they're involved from day one, and you'll be great. But like I said, it's a multi-billion-dollar opportunity there.
Yeah, and context matters, right? Like you need to be. I like what you said about does this person represent the values of our company? Like, I think that's important. Are they the right? If you're selling outdoor equipment, it may be more beneficial for you to have someone with less of a follower count and somebody who has more expertise in something? Like, is there an Olympic skier that is a fan of your product that could more accurately describe what your skis do and don't do? Like, do you add credibility or do you decrease credibility depending on who you bring in? And then I like your point, Jared, about not being able to control those folks, and there's good and bad with that. And there are some, you're rolling the dice a little bit with somebody outside of your company. I've even seen some products that sell very well with someone who is not afraid to share the negatives of the product. And you need to be aware of what that looks like and know what you're getting into before you go there with an influencer or a celebrity spokesperson or somebody selling on live streaming or social media. Like, is this the right person to represent the value proposition you're trying to represent? And, work through some of those worst case scenarios. Do you have any other questions,
All right.
David?
Yeah, let's get a couple, maybe two more in. What's the best way to build trust in an online commerce site? Good question.
Jared, do you want to hit that one first?
I would say that doing exactly what you tell people you're going to do, 9-day shipping is fine if you tell people it's going to be 9 days, right? Like there's there's other issues around that, but you build trust by load time and by doing what you say you're going to do. And that doesn't mean it doesn't mean you have to provide tons and tons of information. It doesn't mean you should provide no information. Every company is a little bit different, so I'm a little hesitant there. But trust is entirely built on doing what you say you're going to do. And I think, weirdly enough, speed of site fits in with that, because I think if your page load time, which is a weird technical thing, if your page load time is slow, it does give people pause at every part of the journey. And so that's kind of, I think, a thing you can start with. If your page load times aren't where they need to be, there's almost nothing else you can do, I don't think.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the page load time is a great example, Jared, of, I don't think there's one thing that you can do that increases trust with the consumer. I think it's the entire interaction you have with them. Like your page load time, your policy on cookies, your privacy policy, how easy that is to get to. 100% agree with you. Honest, accurate, timely information. We're out of this product. The sooner you know that, and the sooner you share that with your customer, the better off you are. If something's coming in 9 days and I know that up front, then I can make the decision for myself. Nothing's worse than finding out you're not going to get something and you had a specific need that you were assuming that you were going to get that sooner. And so I think it's honesty and integrity and reliable information in a timely manner. But I think building trust with customers is probably one of the most complicated, multifaceted parts of building loyalty for your brand. And then I think the last thing I'll throw in here is when you make a mistake, you need to own that and then overcompensate. And that doesn't mean you give everything away for free. But when you screw up, you've got to own that. You got to go to the customer and tell them that you were wrong, apologize, and then make it right. I think all of those things together is what it takes to build trust. No one thing is going to push you over the edge.
All right. I think that's about it on time and questions. We'll follow up with any others that came in. Do want to get this next slide up in front of everyone and make sure everyone is reminded they can continue the conversation and reach out. Reminders that there are the resources available. So we've got those two available to download now. So take a look there. Also, we will follow up with a link to view this on demand, so look for that. Want to thank James and Jared for taking us through all that great information and sharing your insights, around this topic. So, I want to extend special thanks to Pivotry and Vtex for making this webinar possible. With that, I want to thank everyone for spending some time with us today. We look forward to another partner webinar with all of you soon. Take a look at our events coming up at the icon at the far left corner, and we'll keep you posted on things coming down the line. With that, until the next time, stay safe and keep it spicy. Take care, everyone.